Good evening, everybody. I'm so thrilled to have you here and welcome to tonight's DE Solutions Lab. I'm Dr. Pam Maragliano-Muniz, the Chief Editor for Dental Economics Magazine, and tonight's topic is awesome. It is Recall Shouldn't Suck: How to Easily Capitalize on the Opportunities that are currently sitting in your charts. Now, you would think that most of us think our practices have it together and we're doing all of the things that we need to do. But I think about recall and getting patients to leave with an appointment and people who miss appointments. And all of a sudden, if you actually look at the metrics associated with that, it's sort of like weighing yourself. Like you get on the scale and you're like, oh my gosh, you can't believe, hopefully, if not, but sometimes you feel like you can't believe what that number is. And how did we get here? So tonight, I brought James Cook, the president of sales in the US at RecallMax, to join me tonight. He is a proud husband and father, and James has extensive experience in the patient engagement space over the last decade, and he's helped thousands of dental practices maximize their recall strategies and increase their practice revenues. His prior roles have been within other dental organizations, and his passion for helping others succeed have enabled him to drive outstanding results. James is a graduate of Utah Valley University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in business management with an emphasis in marketing. Now, James, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the intro and thanks for allowing us in here. I feel like I just had a little bit of a book written about me right there. So thanks for thanks for the intro.
Well, everybody needs to get to know you. We're all friends here. So it's important for us to feel confident to hop in the chat, ask your questions. If you have a question, I'm sure one of your neighbors on Zoom here has one as well. So we're going to have plenty of time to get to your questions. So throw them in the chat. If you're a little shy, you can send them to me. Don't worry about that. But I'd love for us to really have a conversation here. That's really the purpose of these DE Solutions Lab. Now, James, question for you. Recall isn't supposed to suck. So for some practices, is the suckiness of recall inevitable, or is there something that we can do about it? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, good question. It's not supposed to suck, and it's a four-letter word in many practices, but unfortunately, too many times it does. And there is a solution to where it doesn't have to. There's processes and different things in which you can implement. Obviously, one of those being RecallMax, to where you can implement and put into your practice to really help streamline the process and really your day-to-day operations. Happy to jump in here and show you a little bit more what I'm talking about here. So again, recall shouldn't suck. And we actually have shirts. It's kind of become our slogan, and it started out as a little bit of a joke several years ago, and it stuck. And, we now have shirts. So if you see us at trade shows or out at events, you'll oftentimes see us wearing our shirts that say recall shouldn't suck. So, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit why it shouldn't, and RecallMax, our primary focus really focuses on four pillars here. And it's number one, which is to increase the quality of care for patients, which I think we can all agree should be our number one priority, our number one focus. Number two is to find opportunities in charts and then create strategies to capture that opportunity. Number three is to simplify day-to-day operations of the admins, which, over the last several years, I would say potentially the majority of the strain of a practice has been placed on those front office users. And of all the tools that are out there in the dental field, there's very few that help make their day-to-day operations easier. And then if I could add a fourth here, it would be to monitor and measure results of what's happening in the practice, to take quick glimpses of the health of the practice, how well your automation is working, how well your staff is engaging, and be able to track those things and benchmark so you can actually improve. So the agenda today, Dr. Pam, is first we're going to dive into the current landscape of what we see and what we're experiencing with users on RecallMax and those in which we talk to every single day. We're also going to talk about strategies and ways in which you can capture opportunities in your charts. We're going to talk about the importance of measuring And then we'll do a quick overview or a quick look at RecallMax so you can see what it looks like. So first of all, the landscape. And this is, I get on demos every single day and talk to doctors and office managers just like yourselves. And I refer to this little thing in which we've gone through here as the COVID bubble effect. And I know, that 5-letter word is one that we wish we could just erase from our dictionary. Unfortunately, we can't. And we're seeing this COVID bubble effect take place in our schedules every day. And, I look back on when that experience happened and practices closed, or, there were limitations or restrictions in place. So you couldn't maximize your schedules. You had virtual waiting rooms, you had COVID screeners, you had all these different things that were implemented and thrown into your practice. Then you compound that with the fears of patients, which is a very real thing and still exists even now, even though we're working through this. And then which ultimately led and leads to cancellations and scheduling issues. I'm curious, Dr. Pam, as you practice in your day-to-day operations, how do you feel like this COVID bubble has impacted you and your practice?
Oh my goodness. I think most people can agree that this COVID bubble almost feels like a COVID roller coaster. Obviously, 2020 was kind of like a special animal by itself. But now as we've sort of, reopened that kind of thing, I still feel like it's coming in waves. I remember right after the new year, I felt like we could not pay our patients to come in, like everybody, it was just so many people were either testing positive or exposed to somebody who was positive or something like that. And it seemed like it calmed down. And I felt like, wow, it feels like we're like back to normal. And now all of a sudden, it seems like this week, patients are dropping like flies again. So I don't know. I don't think we can rest on our laurels or get comfortable quite yet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I remember when COVID was first a thing, there was and I'm sure you all had similar restrictions, but we had 2 weeks to curb the curve, or to slow the curve is what it was. And that obviously was a drastic understatement of how long it was going to take to slow that curve. And, to your point, we still feel the effects of it, even now as, COVID cases have risen and other things have come into play that we still have to be responsible with. I do think overall we've learned how to manage it into our day-to-day lives. But, to your point, once somebody's been in contact or has, received a positive COVID test, there's kind of this absolutely responsible thing of, hey, you sit in the dugout for 5 days and you sit on the bench until that passes through. So I'm glad that people are being more responsible and more aware of it. But it doesn't mean it's gone. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact the day-to-day operation of the practice. I look back on this little bubble, which I'm going to talk into here, is, when practices reopened, the patients that were most focused on their oral health returned. And because of this, this is something that you'll all be able to relate to. The scheduling on your hygiene schedule, instead of it being 1-2 months, it then immediately became 4, 5, 6 months pushed out, and you were, just resource strained. Your schedule is to the max. You may have even opened up days to try and catch up. Maybe opened your hours a little bit later. You were trying to hire temp hygienists and temp staff to help get through that. This is the best way to describe it, I think, is that your staff felt like they were drinking out of a fire hose because there was just so much happening. And, it was a lot of strain that was placed on those front office admins, which, it's no shock that a third of office admins during this time resigned and left, and which created another staffing shortage and another strain on the office, right? But what happened during all of this is that this bubble created what I would say is a lull of in the schedule where patients couldn't be seen. And now that we're catching up and we're working through this bubble, we're seeing the dips in hygiene forecasts because recall wasn't being worked or couldn't be worked because the schedules were so full and there was no room for patients. But the reality is prior to all of this, there were still unscheduled patients in your charts. Well, every time there's a blip in this, COVID bubble effect, your unscheduled patient list actually grows. Even though you feel busier when it catches back up, your unscheduled list grows. And it creates a problem for the office as you try to work through those. And your staff can oftentimes feel frustrated or stressed because the process to go through what they need to get through this bubble is just, it's wearing, to say the least, I would say. And I know it's wearing for providers too, where you're, slamming patients in chairs all day long to just try and catch up. So, and this is a real live look in here of exactly what I'm talking about. So here at RecallMax, we actually track your hygiene and recall forecast. So this is a glimpse of, I just pulled up a random practice and you'll see that the scheduled appointments is dipping. And that's because that bubble or those patients that couldn't be seen are now being put onto the schedule. But you're seeing all these patients do over here, they're not being worked. Because they're at their scheduling capacity. Well, we need these patients that aren't being worked are actually falling into inactivity. And, there takes a special outreach for those patients there. I want to show you in numbers what this means. This is just a snapshot or a sample of 2,500 dental practices that we took a glimpse into. And pre-COVID, the unscheduled patient base in the charts, keep in mind, this is just patients within the last 24 months. We're not catching or tracking patients that, have been missing for 6 years or whatever it might be. So within the last 2 years, any given database that we sink into or take a glance into, 52% were unscheduled. Well, now, as things have settled down a little bit, we're sitting at 58%. Now, I know 52 to 58 doesn't feel like anything to go pull the fire alarm and panic about. And maybe it's not, because there's solutions for it. But I want to put this into actual hard numbers so you can see what it looks like. So pre-COVID, 1.8 million in these 2,500 dental practices of unscheduled patients to 2.5, almost 2.6 million patients that are now unscheduled patients. So now you talk about, again, the number one focus here for RecallMax and for all providers across North America is quality of care for patients. Well, as we start to see that unscheduled patient list grow, that's more and more patients that are falling off hygiene care, off continuing care, falling off their hygiene schedule, that just aren't receiving the care that they should to make sure that we're focused on the quality of the care. So 700,000 patients missed and canceled. This is another number in which we measure and monitor. Pre-COVID, 7%. And actually, this has risen recently, but currently it hovers around 18%. We are seeing spikes of upwards of 25% in other practices, especially as COVID waves or sickness waves roll through. You'll see what you thought was once a full schedule the night before come in the next day, and you have a ton of cancellations that you have to work through, which again, I'll show you some tools here RecallMax can help. But let's put those into numbers. 283,000 missed appointments or canceled to now 828. So a massive number here too. Due and late patients. These are patients that can be seen today that are just not on the schedule. And pre-COVID, it was about 33% that were due or late that were not on the schedule. So again, keeping in mind, this is only active patients within the last 2 years. And it's funny because I talk to practices every single day and everybody thinks that they're excluded from these numbers. But every time we sink in and do a health check, it's the same thing. It's about a third of their due late patients are not scheduled. And it's no fault of anyone really. The intentions are there, the effort is there, I would say, but the tools aren't there. And again, I'm going to show you and explain what that looks like with RecallMax. But currently, the due and late patients is about 38%. So again, 5%, massive numbers here. So you're looking at a difference about 507,000 patients that are due today that aren't on the schedule. That's just in our sample, right? So again, I want to put this into some numbers here to where 507,000 patients that have fallen off the recall cycle. If we did an annual spend of about 500 a patient, which is, I would say, conservative, because this isn't calculating any kind of restorative work that might surface. This isn't calculating, multiple exams that might be needed. So it's typically about a hygiene and an exam and, a cleaning here. But if we did that value, that means just in this sample size of this 2,500 dental practices, this is just like stupid numbers, but almost $254 million in missed opportunities and charts. So again, number one, we want to focus on the quality of care for patients. But number two, we want to help you grow the practice, which, and capture this opportunity. And we believe at RecallMax that at any given time, that the opportunity that exists in charts, about 50% of it is recoverable. You can bring that back. You can go win that. But it takes effort and some willpower there to go make that happen. I do want to put this on a national scale and, hang on to your chair because it's a little disturbing, I think. But that means about 50 million patients have fallen off their recall schedule throughout the 190,000 practices in the United States, which means at that same $500 a patient, that's a $25 billion missed opportunity in charts. So again, we believe we can capture about half of that, which equates to about 12.5 billion. So number one, quality of care. Number two, opportunity in charts. It exists. How do we get it? So, but before I jump into this, I do want to pause and see if there's any questions or anything that might surface that I can help address before we move on.
Yes, there's a question actually that came to me directly, and it was about, you mentioned these numbers about the missed appointments, and it's kind of based off of these 2,500 practices, but are you finding that there's variation based on location, or is it pretty much like take 2,500, take that number, divide by 2,500, and it's pretty much across the board?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much across the board. 2,500 is a pretty good sample size. You're then looking at, tens of millions of messages of automation that's going out, tens of millions of patients. I mean, you're talking about a massive scale of opportunity to be able to see on that sample. And, there is an occasional, every once in a while, to where an office will surprise us and they'll be under those benchmarks that we've shown you. But for the most part, at any given time, we can do a sync into the charts and it's exactly the same. I'm not calling anybody out on any of this, but I would challenge, if any of you are questioning that, take us up on our free health check and see. You can actually take a glance. We'll look at it. There's no strings attached. You can have the data and look at it and see for yourself where you stand from the health of the practice. But yeah, to answer your question, Dr. Pam, it's pretty much across the board. Again, there's occasionally a few outliers, but not very often.
I think another thing to even look at is, I spend a lot of time talking to various practice consultants and contributors for dental economics. And if you take your practice and kind of look at the number of holes in your schedule and multiply it by your production per hour, if it's in your column as dentists or practice owners, and then obviously you can do the same for hygiene, those numbers, that's gone. Those are missed opportunities. The number can be staggering. And so I think being able to recoup some of those funds it's life or death for many practices.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to break this down into a practice per practice throughout the country, of recoverable opportunities, it's somewhere right around, $75,000 to $80,000 per practice that we at any given time, just through due late patients, that we could help recover. That there's a whole nother unscheduled treatment and opportunity that you can find there, which I'll dive into as well.
Well, I think the next, there's a question that just came in. I think that's the perfect segue into your next point is, how do we fix this?
Yeah, actually, it's legitimately the perfect segue. So how can we capture the opportunity? So thanks for the question there, and I'm happy to show you. So, I think there's these two processes which I'll oftentimes feel like they're competing, where you have this automation strategy, which is critical, and you should have that. Your reminders, your confirmations, your recall, your continuing care, form, scheduler, whatever it is, it's all part of the automation strategy. And it's part of the strategy. We're not at all saying cut that out. It's not. And a lot of times the people that we speak with, they feel like these are competing processes of like, hey, I have my people and then I have my automation system. Well, what we here at RecallMax is we believe that it should be an and, not a verse, right? Is you should understand what's happening in one side and create a strategy on the other side that supports that. And again, automation is good. It's part of the process, and you should have that. However, there's some not so good of automation. And again, I've been in this space for a long time. I've seen the ebbs and flows of automation. I think we as patients, consumers in general, have become more numb to automation, to where if we know it's automated, we're less likely to respond now. And versus a personal outreach or a personal text, we're way more likely to respond to one of those. Even if it's a personal text from the office manager or admin, they're more likely to respond to those. And the not so good on auto messaging here is, you've probably oftentimes heard, automation works 70% of the time, which is, kind of true. You got 60 to 65% that confirm through automation, which again, that saves massive amounts of time from your staff. But when it comes to due or late, or patients that have gone beyond their appointment, it's staggering, the number there. It usually peaks at about a 10% response rate of people that schedule appointments from automation, which, that's a massive opportunity. So, for a dumbed down sake here, if you have 100 patients on your due late list right now, only 10 of them are going to book an appointment through your automation strategy. Well, what are you going to do with those other 90? What are you doing for them? And that's where we think, the plan or the process needs to be built around the sustainable growth. And how do we do that? And I would, we tried to make this as memorable as possible, but I would look at it as these 3 P pillars, right? It's number one, you got to plan. You got to be able to see forecasts and see some analytics. You got to get some benchmarks and some metrics of your office. You have to get your staff and your people to invest into patients. We know, because we track it, that you're going to get a 4-to-1 response rate of a personal outreach versus automation when it comes to due late patients. So again, working those strategies together. And then, figuring out a process to be able to implement the two together so they combine and they cooperate versus working against each other. And to help illustrate that here, you could take a glance at your own workflow here in your office. You probably have this internal workflow that might involve printing out lists, printing out reports, calling on those lists, doing patient searches. And then you have this automated workflow. And very rarely do we actually see that those actually work together and the strategy works together, which is why it's really critical that we at RecallMax monitor these response rates so we can understand what's happening in your automated workflow and then point you to the strategy in your internal workflow so those things support each other rather than you calling on top of whatever your automated workflow is doing. So for many practices, we just see that these workflows don't work in tandem, and it results in lost revenues and patients falling through the cracks and becoming inactive patients. So I'm getting to the question, how do we fix it? But I don't want to ever come across here that we're saying cut out automation. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying, it should be kind of the cherry on top, and it should be there to help make processes easier, should be there to help save time for your staff, but it cannot be your only strategy. The set it, forget it strategy, I've only seen it work one time. It was what was that rotisserie chicken? Do you remember that ad to where it's like, set it and forget it? Yeah. That's the only time I've seen it work. Especially when it comes to business and people and trying to make sure that your dental practice is maximizing the opportunity in the charts, there's no automated system that's going to capture that. And especially as patients continue to become more and more numb to automation, there needs to be a supportive strategy or a strategy that really works with the automation there. So I know, you've got all of these stresses and all of these worries and all of these frustrations that come in and out of the practice. Totally get that. So now the question is, well, where do we focus on? What's the highest priority? How do we work this? And number one, and you're going to look at this and think, yeah, this is not rocket science, James. Like, I know this part. However, this is where I would push back and say, I know you know these things, but do you have the tools to do them? And number one is pre-appointing all your patients. It's the number one step in keeping a patient from going inactive is getting them on the schedule as soon as possible. And if they do miss or cancel, you got to have a process that captures those and gets them back on the schedule. Then you start to attack the opportunity within the restorative treatment and unscheduled treatment, and then filling openings on the schedule and managing those hygiene lists. An analogy in which I would use for this, and one that I've used before, if you were to go ask me to build a deck and you gave me a hammer and nails, I could probably do it. Like, I could piece it together, but it's not going to be great. And I'm legitimately going to hate every second of it. And because you gave me the wrong tools to build a deck. However, if you gave me the right tools, you gave me a little bit of help to do that, I could hammer that out. I could figure it out. I could make it look good. I could make it be effective. And again, the intent in both scenarios was there to build a nice deck, right? However, the tools are what makes the difference. So this is where we're getting at with RecallMax. We introduced those tools to help make the difference. So I saw a chat come in here, and I don't want to get too far past that. So let me make sure I catch that question there.
I don't mind jumping in and helping. So Rosemary, thank you for this really great question. And this is so relevant to many practices. She writes, we currently call and remind/confirm patients the day before. We don't have an automated system. We still have a lot of no-shows. We even go as far as if they're 5 minutes late, we will call them to see if they're just running late or if they need to be rescheduled. And they're in search for an automated program.
Rosemary, I would be happy to take this offline sometime as well and do a one-on-one with your practice to give you an evaluation of that, which I think you're exactly on why both of these strategies are key to work together, to where you should have an automated system that's reminding them, maybe save the date appointments as they walk out from their pre-appoint, adds to their calendar, then one that keeps track of their confirmation status all the way up to their appointment. So if they're 2 weeks out, they get a reminder. And if they're unconfirmed, still a week out, maybe it's another reminder, versus if they are confirmed, maybe it's just a soft reminder saying, hey, you've already confirmed for your appointment, right? And keeping them on that automation. And then those that aren't confirmed, do exactly what you're doing. Call the day before and get a hard commit on them. A strategy that I think is also one that you should consider is putting in some type of cancellation policy. Again, I don't think the intent there is to necessarily make a ton of money off of cancellation policy, but it's to show that you're serious. And then, as harsh as this sounds, your habitual no-showers, you don't want them. You should cut them out of the practice and you should move on from them, because they're going to continue to hammer your schedule and create gaps. Again, I'd be happy to reach out to you and we could chat a little bit more to where I could give you individual tips for your practice, but you should have those strategies in place to help maximize your efforts there. We already know that 80% of no-shows occur because they never confirm for the appointment. So the first step is to get them to confirm as soon as possible without being too far away from the appointment. So hopefully that helps a little bit as you continue to strategize there. RecallMax here, I want to give you a quick glimpse here, this screenshot that I took here. We're actually an application that sits right on top of the scheduler. So you don't have to leave and go to an external window. And we equip you with the right tools here to be able to have these lists or have these contacts, have these patients right at your fingertips. So again, instead of a hammer and nails to where you have to go print reports, do patient search, spend 3 to 7 minutes per patient trying to find all the data and all the info before you even make a voicemail, before you even make a call, you can have that within 3 to 5 seconds at RecallMax. So you'll look at some of these tools, which I'll show you in a minute, and it's not necessarily like groundbreaking tools. It's just no-brainer tools that's like, oh yeah, we should have that in the practice and we should be using those tools, right? So great question, Rosemary. Thanks for your input there. I'm a firm believer that you just can't improve what you don't measure. I mean, how can you possibly? I'm a big sports coach. I coach all my son's sports. And that would be like me coming to him and say, hey, just run faster. It's like, run faster than what? Like, I don't even know what the benchmark is. It's like, oh, well, just go faster or hit the ball harder. Or, it just doesn't make sense. And, when you go to your staff and it's like, hey, be better at recall. It's like, okay, like, I guess I'll keep working these lists. Like, I don't know, like, I think I'm doing as much as I can, which is why it's very critical to measure staff productivity, to measure the health of the practice, to measure, your KPIs so you can understand what's happening in a quick glimpse of the practice. Here at RecallMax, we encourage you to set out even incentive programs for your staff members to schedule treatment and go after these lists and coverage, which I think it's a win-win. The staff member feels more engaged and ready to go after it. And the practice wins too, because more treatment and more patients are being scheduled. So, what can we measure? Again, there's a ton of stuff we can measure. And the main KPIs, which I think are important, are exactly the ones in which we talked about with the pre-appoint and missed and canceled and due and late patients, understanding where your patients are, and even going as far as understanding what the treatment looks like, the opportunity of unscheduled diagnosed treatment in your charts. So at RecallMax, we capture all the diagnosed treatment within the last 12 months that is not scheduled, and show that to you in an easy to read chart, and then give you the tools without having to go through all the pains of getting that treatment back on. So again, if you have only an automated system, this is not going to touch any of your unscheduled treatment. It's not going to. It only tracks the continuing care, the reminders. Well, what about the treatment? That's where, big bucks can be made for the practice to drive in revenue. Well, that's where you need a tool like RecallMax that highlights that and then gives you the proper tools to go after it, which is why we think once you connect these analytics, the actions to analytics, you can stop managing historically. You don't have to look backwards to see how things went. You can start looking forward to your forecast. You can start looking forward to what's on your schedule. You can start looking forward to your opportunity in your charts and start working towards that versus looking back and saying, how did we do? How did it go? Which is a very different way to manage a business. It's harder to course correct if you're looking backwards, and it's very easy to course correct as you look forward and you can see a glimpse into what's coming up. So before I finish up here, Dr. Pam, any other questions that I can help answer?
I think more so a couple of comments. One is, I think that when you do a health check on your practice or you start to look at these reports that you might not have looked at, I think it can be a little overwhelming and in some cases a little disappointing. And, it might even make you a little frustrated with some of your team members. But I think that, like you said, James, it's so important to to have something that's measurable. So regardless of what your practice looks like at the moment, there's always a starting off point and a place to go. So I think that's really important. And another point was about automation, that it's one thing to get your patients scheduled and get them in, but there's really something important about automation when it comes to trying to solicit reviews and getting patients to, give reviews, because nowadays we also live and die by our web presence. And so, it's not so much, it doesn't just end by getting the butt in the chair, if you will. It's, this constant cycle that we have to go through to keep our practices going.
Yeah, great comments there. And yeah, you're exactly right. There is obviously a new patient strategy that supports all of this as well. I'm a firm believer as well that it's always easier to keep a patient from going inactive than it is to reactivate them. And I've straight up told practices as recent as today, stop focusing on new patients because you have so many, borderline inactive patients or unscheduled patients that are easy to recruit and get back in. However, you're exactly right. You do need to continue to focus on the new blood and bring that in, because you will inevitably have some people that fall out the back door and fall out the practice, which, getting Google reviews and other web presence is critical to that success. And at RecallMax, we help you out with that too. We can help you get Google reviews. We can help you do those things. So, whatever it is, from automation to processes to helping out with people and managing staff productivity, we got you covered. And it is important, though, that you have all of those tools to really help make a successful practice. And if you don't, to your point, that's where it's going to feel really stressful and really frustrating. And, again, we'll do health checks for anybody that wants them. I have in the past had some office managers be hesitant to do a health check because they're afraid of what they'll see, but it's okay. That's what I'm here to say, is it's okay. There's always a path forward on this. And it's not there to highlight weaknesses or to highlight, where things are not going so hot. It's there to highlight opportunity that you can go after. And I've never done a health check with a client that didn't spin off or come out into a positive outlook and a positive, momentum moving forward. So, don't be stressed about what you'll see, or, hopefully maybe what you won't see. I don't know. But it is a great opportunity to see what your practice looks like. Right. So, and to, with those that want to take advantage of RecallMax, we have you covered all the way through. We're fully integrated in. We have, platinum services and that we can plug in one-on-one consultants and really help dive into the analytics and those health checks and give you a direction based off of, what we see in the space, and give you, a path forward. I didn't mention this, and I probably should have, but RecallMax was born out of dental consultancy. We, over 25 years of experience of, well, not me, but of others in dental experience, consulting experience that have been in the day-to-day operations, that have seen the gaps that exist, that have seen, the struggles that you go through. In fact, the majority of our support team and onboarding team were once part of a dental practice in hygiene, or even doctors. So they get it. They understand what you go through. We know what those pains look like. And the one-on-one consulting that you're getting are from people that have run large practices all the way down to solo practices that can really help you hone in on what you should be focused on. And we're there to help you all the way along the way. So I do want to, those that are interested, Rosemary, it sounds like there's some interest there for us to connect offline. You can scan this here and we'll capture your info and we can connect in with you at another time. While I have you still, I'm gonna show you, a quick glance into RecallMax and some of the tools which we provide. Is that all right with you, Dr. Pam?
Absolutely. There was a question that came to me privately. It was about, what practice management softwares do you integrate with?
Yeah, great question. So we're in with Dentrix, EagleSoft, Open Dental, Dentrix Enterprise, PracticeWorks. So the bigger ones out there. And depending on, what part of North America you're in. We also have large coverage in Canada as well, to where we cover almost every single practice management software up there as well.
Cool.
So you should be able to see my screen here, right?
Yes.
All right, what you're seeing here is not an actual scheduler, just a mock-up of one. And you saw a screenshot here of RecallMax sits right on top of your schedule over to the right-hand side here. And it gives those tools, or brings those tools to where you live day in and day out, which is right on your scheduler. So you don't have to go to an external window. You don't have to go somewhere else. It's all here. So let me introduce you to Max here. Right here, this top tab is where you're going to primarily live. So again, this is all your list reports right at your fingertips here. Up here is that bucket of patients that are due to come in soon, that are on the schedule but have not confirmed yet. So again, number one step is you want to get them to confirm, and it may take a little bit of work. This next bucket is what I'd call your opportunity bucket, from missed pre-appointment to unscheduled treatment. And then this last bucket here is your recall bucket. So I do want to focus here on, some missed pre-appointment. I'll work through this, real briefly here. But on the missed pre-appoint, we capture anybody that walks out the door that doesn't fall into the schedule, right? So you think about that process without RecallMax, it's very time consuming. You have to keep track of the patient. You either have to write it down, you have to go back in your practice management software and find it one by one, or you hope that the automated system catches it. Typically, it won't until they become due or late. So once they become due or late, now you've already pushed that continuing care cycle out. And if they're due or late, you've already seen the response rates to an automated system once they're due or late. It's about 10% at the cap, right? So we do want to make sure that all patients are walking out pre-appointed. That should be your goal, is to pre-appoint 100% of your patients. And if that falls short, we provide this list here to be able to capture that for you. With one click here, you have all of the information here. You can understand what your task is and understand, what procedures or treatments that this patient may need to come in for. And we know Kathy here is 18 years old. There's probably a pretty strong likelihood that she's going to respond to a text versus a phone call, right? In fact, I would say it's a 99.999% that she's going to prefer this text over a phone call. So right here within RecallMax, I jump over to this envelope tab, and I can open up a text chat and start texting with Kathy. So I can let her know, hey, Kathy, this is James, which adding that in is critical because now they know it's not automated. Over at All Star Dental, looking to get you back on the schedule. Yeah. You get the point here. So now I can send that text message over. I can throw out some proposed times 6 months out. I would recommend here that you find times that they're used to coming into, and just propose that time to them on the schedule. Say, hey, looks like you like the afternoon spots. I've got you for February 3rd at 2:30, 3 p.m., right? So right here within RecallMax, again, I can come back over here. I click this check mark, appointment scheduled, boom, done. This is probably my favorite part of RecallMax, is we're actually one of the only system that has a push-pull integration on note taking. So any note that was taken in your practice management software will be shown here in RecallMax, and vice versa. Any note that you take in RecallMax will push back into your practice management software. So now imagine this workflow. Your front office comes in for the day. They open up this list. They work these confirmations. They work these pre-appoint. They can jump right over here, add notes, new insurance, whatever, and submit that. It's going to leave a tab, it's going to tag who did that and write that back into your practice management software. So again, making this whole process easy. Maybe somebody in the back office or a different operatory puts in a note, no problem. I'm going to see that the next time RecallMax syncs in with your practice management software. As you're working this system, you have the ability here to kick out forms and do other things as well, all from within, RecallMax's toolbar. So again, you don't have to go anywhere else. So from what we've seen and what we've experienced, the intent is always there. It's always there from your office users. I've never met anybody that said, yeah, my front office just sucks. Like they don't, you know, the intent is there. They want to do a good job. People want to perform well, but it goes back to that deck analogy. It's like, they don't have the tools to do it. Like, and if they do have tools, it's so choppy in their workflow process where it takes them to another window or to some other tab. And anytime you take them out of the scheduler or their workflow process, you know, sayonara to productivity, it goes down. So RecallMax here, I'll keep introducing you to some other tabs here. I love the unscheduled treatment. Check out how easy this is. So again, I want you to pause, think about how hard this is without RecallMax and how hard it is to work this unscheduled treatment list versus with. So right here, pulled all the patients that have been diagnosed with treatment within the last 12 months. I come up here and filter. I can do by different plan status. I can do by different procedure codes. So if I want to go after crowns or bridges, whatever it is that I want to do, I can do that. So for the sake of this here, so time me here if you've got your stopwatch, 1 click, 2 clicks, I have the entire treatment plan in front of me, and I can understand when their last appointments were. I can jump over, see what notes there are, and I have that all right in front of me, ready to go without having to spend all that time researching that patient, right? You get that patient on the phone, no big deal. You can kick out a consent form if you need to, right? Send that over, boom, appointment scheduled, submit. I can click here, get right over to my schedule, put them in the schedule, and right back over to where I'm, whoops. My computer just froze here. Well, let me reshare this here. Well, you get the idea there. I'm not sure why if you guys can hear it, it's beeping at me. I'm not sure why it's beeping at me. Either way, the whole idea there is that it gives you the toolbars and the tools to right on screen to go after the opportunity in your charts, to highlight the toolbars, the patients that need to be worked, that need to come back in, and really helping you prioritize what your day-to-day operation looks like. And, you know, the tools without RecallMax and trying to manage that on your own, it's just so hard. And, you know, it's no wonder why your staff feels frustrated or stressed at times, because, you know, the processes to do it are, you know, dang near impossible to keep track of. And you think about, you know, what you ask them to do from a pre-appoint to, you know, managing the missed and canceled, to working unscheduled treatment, to then fill the hygiene schedule. You know, it's a lot. And if you don't have the tools there, it's just not going to be as productive or as, you know, efficient as you'd want it to be. So, you know, before we wrap up here, I do want to answer any other questions that might have come in, you know, while I was showing that toolbar.
I wish I was at my practice, because I think what I would have done is I would have tried to print out our unscheduled treatment list, and I'd probably still be working on it right now, even with your computer freezing up on you.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, I talk to so many practices and I ask them what their process is for unscheduled treatment and recall. And most of the time, it's exactly what you just said. It's like, oh, we print out a list. It's like, okay, well, how do you manage that list? It's like, oh, I don't know. I pass one to, you know, a treatment coordinator, and I start at the top, they start at the bottom, and we just meet in the middle somewhere. It's like, okay, well, where do the notes go? It's like, oh, we just scribble them on the paper. It's like, okay, so then how would I know if I came in tomorrow to work, how to work that? Like, where do I find those notes? And, you know, that's typically where we see front offices. I've been into a ton of dental practices to where like their computer screens are just like covered with sticky notes. And it's like, that's the office admin trying to keep track of everything, you know, of all the notes and all the patient search that they're gathering. And then they go and make that phone call just to leave a voicemail. And it's frustrating, and it can be really time consuming and unproductive that way.
It's true. So there's a couple of questions that came to me, and it was, I think we're just kind of reiterating that if you do have automated systems like Lighthouse or Revenue Well, for example, This is in addition to those. This is not to get rid of your existing contracts or wait for that contract to ride out. This is a totally different service.
No, I mean, it can be, but it doesn't, you don't have, we do everything that they do. So this is where we're not asking you to sacrifice what one of those automated systems brings to you. We do that. We've got you covered, all things automation. And so there would be no need for both. And why oftentimes those competitors, they view us as competitor, but we don't really view them as a competitor because they don't do everything that we do. So they don't touch the analytics. They don't touch the toolbar. They don't touch those things. Yeah. And to your point with Lighthouse and others, the majority of why customers have them is for reminders and for recall. Well, we already got you covered there. There's no need to have both of us because you can use us for those same things.
Does RecallMax sit on every computer workstation? So say that we have we can obviously access the schedule from any operatory, or is it kind of, workstation specific?
It's up to you. So you can put it on as many or as few as you'd like. We're a cloud-based software, so you could even install it at your house if you'd like and have access to the schedule that way. But from our recommendations is I don't know if I'd put it back in operatories necessarily, but definitely you can have it on multiple stations up front. And the cool thing with RecallMax is as you're working, simultaneously, you can see where the other person is working. So you won't step on toes. You're not going to call the same person that maybe somebody else is calling. You'd be able to work those lists effective and efficiently.
Can you comment on HIPAA and security of your system?
Yeah, so we're 100% HIPAA compliant. Everything and every message that sends out automatically from RecallMax is going to meet HIPAA compliancy and be good there. As far as security goes, we're bank encrypted. It's as secure as it can be, and secure as anywhere else you'd find on data. And so, there's no worries there on either one of those. Granted, you do have the ability to send out two-way text messaging. So we can't guarantee that your staff members aren't going to say something via the two-way text, right, on a HIPAA side. So you will want to monitor that. You will want to see. We do keep, you'd always be able to log in and see the history of text chats and two-way text messaging. So you could see what's happening, and it always tags who sends that message. So if there's something borderline, you'll want to make sure you train your staff on that make sure they're remaining HIPAA compliant. But anything that we would send out automatically on your behalf absolutely meets that criteria.
Awesome. There's a question. My office manager needs to see this. Can you walk me through will you do an office demo?
So yeah, absolutely. If you'll scan that QR code that's on the screen there, or I'm happy to give you my personal information as well. I'll drop that in the chat here in a second. You can call me and I'd get you in touch with one of our product specialists or myself if you'd prefer that, to walk through it with you and show a personalized demo for you in your office. That's the preferred method. This webinar is to help you understand tools that are at your fingertips that you can implement and put in. But we understand that every practice is unique in its own way, and it is better to have a one-on-one discussion. And we'd be happy to show this to any office managers or any staff members, or all, if you'd prefer that as well.
Awesome. I think we're out of questions, actually. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, just number one, thanks for letting me join you. I appreciate the opportunity to always connect in with dental experts and learn. You didn't get the opportunity to have the private conversation that Dr. Pam and I had before, but she helped me learn today too. And I appreciate the knowledge that's shared. I love the dental industry. It's a big world, but it's very tight knit. And so number one, thanks for letting us be a part of it. Number two, if you feel stressed, frustrated with anything that we talked about, just know there's solutions. You don't have to battle those day in and day out on your own, or try to feel like you're left without the tools necessary to go tackle those tasks in front of you. We're here to help you. And we believe every practice can use the tools from RecallMax. And we'll prove it to you first, by doing that health check and showing you what the opportunity looks like. So, number one, thanks. Number two, it's all good. It'll be okay. We'll make it through this. And we're really excited to be able to show those that are interested to learn more about RecallMax and how it can benefit their practice individually.
James, I have to thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge with us. I think that we kind of, grimace and huff and, kind of look the other way and just move on to the next patient when we have a no-show or a last minute cancellation, and to know that there are services out there that can easily help us recoup some of those potential missed opportunities. It's just like, it's so valuable to our practice, and there's really no other way to put it. So I really appreciate you for sharing all of the tips and tools and the health check and everything that you're offering to the audience of dental economics. Now, everybody, I would like to thank you for joining us tonight. I think this was a great group. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate you for sending them and for participating. Please follow us on Instagram at Dental Economics Official. And for DE Solutions Lab, join us next week. I will continue my conversation with Gary Cady from Next Level Practice as we discuss how to inflation-proof your practice, the 3 ways to beat rising wages, low insurance reimbursements, and soaring overhead. So for James Cook and RecallMax and DE Solutions Lab, I'm Dr. Pam Maragliano-Muniz. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Good night.